Good evening, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of the Big O Podcast. I am your host, Julian Ortiz, and today I am joined by one of the co-hosts of the Politics as Usual podcast, Mr. Alex. Now, I don't want to say your last name right now because I had some problems saying it with your brother last night. However, I do want you to say it, but we will refer to you as Bambino Rino, which I want to get into the origin of that. So if you tell the people your name and a little bit about yourself.
So on the Politics as Usual podcast, my broadcasting name is Rino. That's what I go by. That name actually came from Dan Marino with the precision. I just got that precision.
Oh boy.
That's where the name comes from.
Very nice. Now, Rino from Dan Marino. Now that's like a shot with your brother, because your brother is the Miami Dolphin fan of the family. And I warned you about this. I was going to go in, and it's starting pretty early because you brought up football already. You're a Cincinnati Bengals fan. Joe Burrow, that's your dude. How does it feel to be one of the most dysfunctional teams of the last 15 years?
You know what? I look at it like this. It's going to be the sweetest when we finally win. That's how I look at it. It's been a rough journey. I remember the days of like Delta O'Neal and Chad Johnson, Hushmanzada.
Yeah.
I remember those days. And that was a moment. And then, Carson Palmer got injured in that playoff game. That one hurts me till this day in that Steelers game. So yeah, I've just been riding out with this team for a long, long time, and we're going to win eventually. It won't always be bad. Eventually, we're going to win. Probably before Miami. I feel like we'll win before Miami.
Shots fired already.
Personally.
Wow. I mean, I liked Hushmanzada. That one great name. He had a good set of hair on him as well. Delta O'Neal, what a throwback. I mean, they had Pac-Man Jones on their team at one point. They had that really good tight end.
Are you talking about Tyler Eifert?
No. I said good tight end, not Tyler Eifert. Okay. I can't remember his name right now. They had Chad Johnson at one point as well. Not Chad Johnson. They had T.O. at one point as well.
Yeah, we did.
So, I mean, I was a Carson Palmer fan, as you can see in the background.
Yes,
I'm a USC fan. Yep. So Carson Palmer being the guy at USC, that was, I have some love for him. Although he really got to restart his career when he got to go to Arizona.
Yes,
which was nice, and then had a little stint. I believe before that in Oakland, he was there for a minute, and then left. But enough about your Cincinnati Bengals. I want to sort of get into Alex, or Rino, as we'll refer to you for the rest of the podcast. You are, as I said, one of the co-hosts of the Politics as Usual podcast, and it is easily my favorite podcast that's out there right now. And that's no news to you, because every time you drop an episode, which every Thursday there's a new episode out weekly, by like 3 p.m. I'm hitting you with notes, comments, suggestions.
Of course.
How is the podcast coming along? What's the feedback been like, getting together with two of your buddies? How's it all coming together?
Well, first off, I want to shout out my other co-hosts, Capo and TD. I see y'all. For me personally, it's been the growth, like seeing when I go into my Podbean account and I start looking at analytics and the number, I just start when I start seeing the reach and the different places that are listening to the podcast, that's what kind of lets me know that I'm on the right track and I'm doing what I need to do. We're just trying to be very versatile. So it's when you listen to Joe Rogan, he's who he is because he knows a little bit about everything. So he could talk about pretty much everything. And that's one thing that I really took from him, where I was like, I don't want to be one of these podcasts that are just held in this one lane. And it's I only talk about this, or we only do this. You know what I mean? I
Right.
wanted it to be more of a thing where we could talk about anything. If a scientist was a guest, we can talk to him. If a rapper was a guest, we can talk to him. You know what I mean? I just want to be very versatile. So just kind of trying different things, talking about various different topics, and just kind of seeing where it goes. It's been a great journey. And as you know, there was a lot of hiccups as I was trying to get
Yeah.
everything going. You know what I mean? There's so many different things that people don't know you got to deal with a podcast, and especially when you're starting an LLC at the same time and
Yeah.
all these things, getting things ready and trying to get in full production mode. It's a lot of work. People think it's just us looking good, jumping on these mics and talking all night. It's a lot more. There's a lot that goes into it, of course, and we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean that's been the real like cool thing, right? So our connection, we sort of came together through your brother, who I've worked with, and I consider a close personal friend now. We actually started pre-COVID. My idea for this podcast originated in December. Well, actually, no, that's not true. It originated in 2019, and then in December, I sort of came up with a plan of what I wanted sort of to happen. And as you said, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it,
Yeah.
especially if you're not technically savvy. It's very easy to get on a mic if someone is doing the presets, doing the audio levels,
Right.
know where you're storing it, know where the editing is coming along. And when you have someone helping you with that, it's much easier.
Yep.
But when you're doing it on your own and you have no idea what's going on, it is the biggest challenge. And pre-COVID, I recorded a like 2.5 hour podcast with your brother,
Yes.
where we broke down Love and Basketball, arguably my favorite basketball movie of all
Yes.
time for many different reasons.
Yes.
But it was funny because like pre-COVID, it was like a different time, and then COVID hit,
Mhm.
and it changed the game for a lot of people. And we were talking just before the podcast. Your goal was to start pre-COVID, and I believe if I'm not wrong, you actually recorded either an episode or two episodes, and then COVID
Yes.
hit, and you were forced to turn your bedroom into your new studio space.
Yes. So the craziest thing was it wasn't even two episodes, it was one episode, and
Oh wow!
we were actually starting to do the whole sanitation thing. Like when we went to the studio, there was a bunch of sanitizers. Like it was just really pre-COVID, like
Right,
everybody was talking about it, but there was no lockdown or anything of that.
right,
So we were just all kind of like tripping out because I listened to that episode. It never came out, but I listened to that episode now, and I'm like, we had no idea what we were in store for. Like
right.
what we were talking about, the way we were talking about COVID, you would honestly think it was not something that was going to be so devastating because we had
Yeah.
no idea. We were misinformed. There's a lot of information we didn't get. So it's like we were just going on the fly. And like it's just a little comedic for me to listen to that episode now, seeing how everything is months and months later.
No, it's funny because like sometimes people have technical difficulties. Sometimes they record things and so much in the world changes. And now you have like this vault of this episode. Now, is there any thought because of, like you said, it's comedic, what you guys were saying, how different COVID ended up being than what you guys initially thought it would be. Is there any chance that like you might drop that episode just for fun, just to give a different listen, or is it kind of just it's going to stay back and used as like a template for future episodes?
Well, I'm actually going to put that in the vault. And once this whole COVID thing is over, then I'm going to drop that episode
There we go. See,
and just give a perspective of how naive we were at that moment, not even knowing what was really about to happen. A
it's
pandemic
interesting. I
shook
mean,
the world.
there's there's really no way for people to have known what was happening except if you saw the movie Pandemic,
For
right?
real.
Like like that movie scared the shit out of a lot of people early on in COVID because it released and it was like, wait a second, this is exactly sort of what's going on. Obviously, we didn't get into like the government having to give out food and people, killing each other for groceries or things like that. In some places in the world, I'm sure it got a little chaotic. We're lucky enough living in Canada, more specifically in the GTA. We didn't have to experience those kinds of things, but it really sort of showed what could have been, and it could have been quite devastating
Yeah.
for all of us, right?
It's true. It's definitely true. Shout out to the way Canada handled this whole COVID thing. I got because I'm seeing what's going on in America. Shout out to all my family in the States. It's a different game.
Yeah.
We had it very nice compared to what they had to deal with, and not even just them, Italy and all these other
Oh
countries.
yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm very appreciative of how Canada dealt with this whole COVID-19
Except for Brampton. I'm not gonna give Brampton any credit because there's a man who got like a $200,000 ticket because he had like a 200-person party in the midst of COVID. Like
thing.
Brampton was the worst. Brampton got like the most tickets early on and are still continuing to get them. So as much as you give credit to Canada, I
Yeah.
say excluding Brampton.
Yes,
Brampton doesn't count when it comes to that praise.
Brampton on this one. I'm with you. I had no idea that that was happening. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Well, it's funny because depending on your culture, right? And it's such a big thing, right? Culture really dictates a lot of things. If you are from a culture where family is like a huge important part of your day-to-day life because you've always been that way where you have different houses come together on weekends to have large gatherings, and not like a party but just brothers and sisters who have wives and kids and everybody sort of comes together. If you're used to that, it's a lot harder to restrict yourself from doing it. And I married into a family that is like that. And at times it became really challenging because my wife's parents don't live with us. They live
Mhm.
with two of their other siblings, but they have like four grandkids and they're used to seeing everybody, not going out, but just like used to having everybody over. And that was one of the biggest challenges because they're older, so they're higher risk. Unfortunately, her father suffered from cancer, doesn't have cancer anymore, but because of that, it sort of elevates his
The risk.
risk
Yeah,
level.
yeah, of course.
And they don't really understand it. They don't see it that way. They just see it as we don't get to see our grandkids.
Mhm.
Video chat is not going to do it. Like most people I know, we're doing like video chat dinners. Like I don't know if you saw that, but like that was a real thing.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
and so it became really hard. It became really hard. It became pretty stressful. And so I can understand some of the challenges in certain areas. At the same time, we just have to deal with those things. But
Yeah.
I do sympathize and I do get it, having experienced it just a little bit with my family. I get it. It's hard.
And a lot of Indian families are very big. So
Exactly.
I can understand how, because remember, you're so used to engaging with your family
That's right.
day in and day out, and then now you got the government telling you you can't do it, social distance. You know what I mean? It takes a lot. It takes a toll on people. Social, we're social creatures. You know what I mean? So when you take that
100%.
away from us, some people just don't handle it well. And I can only imagine with a bigger family, it's even worse. You know what I
Or
mean?
or even people who suffer from like mental health challenges, right?
Yeah.
Who need to get out of the house, need to be at work, need to be able to socialize in
True.
order to be mentally healthy. Whereas being locked in at home with no contacts, if maybe they don't have any family or a significant other or anything like that, they're now forced to deal with things on their own. And that may not be the best solution for them with what they're going on with. I mean, I think I read somewhere suicide rates increased during this time from a lot of people who were suffering from mental health or people who struggled because they got laid off from their job, didn't know how they were going to pay their bills, had to foreclose on properties,
True.
this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, those were people who were extremely affected during
Hmm.
COVID-19.
Which I'm not even surprised when I hear that at all, because when people are losing their businesses, like you said, and dealing with these traumatic experiences, and some of them are even losing family members to the sickness at the same time, like a combination of all that can definitely drive someone that's not mentally stable at that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it could definitely push them to a place where they don't want to be.
Now, the other side of this, right? The glass half full, half empty. A lot of people thrived in COVID as well, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people saw this as an opportunity. A few friends of mine joked when I said I was starting a podcast, like podcast or microphones sold out everywhere because everybody and their mom started a podcast during COVID-19. And I mean, and we talked about it too, right? We talked about it that a lot of people were starting a podcast, but
Yes.
when restrictions sort of laid down, people would start to stop or it would get
Mhm.
less. But those people who really pushed through during that time, kept it consistent, kept it interesting, you were going to build your audience during
Right.
COVID to be able to survive post COVID. And
Hmm.
I know you're a business minded guy. And I
Yes.
know this because I asked you how everything was going with your podcast. When are you
Yes.
going to start? And it kept getting delayed. But then you
Mhm.
mentioned, I have a business plan
Yes.
because while some people are playing checkers, you're out here playing chess. You're not
Yeah.
just thinking about the audio content you're putting out. You're thinking about the video, the merch, the website, how you're going to get that reach because your podcast is First Take meets Breakfast Club
Yep.
meets pop culture. I mean,
You got it. It's true. It's
like
true.
you like you don't have this sort of bubble that you're in. You're sort of just like everywhere and engaging, and it's funny and it gets serious. And shout out to Capo who has had his Marvel card revoked
Yes.
as of the Wakanda episode for not remembering that Blade was a part of Marvel.
He got it after though, but in the moment, the
In the
Marvel got
moment, he
happy.
claimed to be a Marvel guy. He self-proclaimed it, right? Like he gave himself the title and then had to walk it back. Had he not said that, it would have been fine.
That's what happens at the Politics as Usual podcast. It's treacherous. Anything can happen. There's line mines everywhere. So
Now
if
I
you
have
want
enjoyed,
to accuse, it can happen.
yeah.
It can
I
happen to the best of us.
and listen, they call you out sometimes too. I mean,
Of
this
course.
latest episode, they called you out for sometimes transitioning to a topic that's off of the beaten path.
Yes. Yes.
And as we know with podcasts, sometimes you have to be able to, you have your formula, you have how you want it to act, but sometimes you just got to veer off to get that point across.
Yep.
How do you guys come up with your topics? Because they're very relevant to the current times, but you get pretty deep into, you peel back the onion. I would describe your episode as an onion. You have it as a whole, but as you peel back, you guys are starting to deep dive into some serious, serious stuff. How did you, number one, get together with your two co-hosts
Yeah.
and then develop the plan that this was the way you wanted to attack your podcast?
So how I got into this whole podcast thing was I used to watch Vlad TV and I would watch the Joe Budden podcast, Joe Rogan. And like I remember one day I was like at work and I was sitting there listening to the podcast and I'm like, I'm just as interesting as some of these guys. I think I could talk about, you know what I mean? Like I like to just
Yeah,
like, anything's possible. If they can do it, why can I not do it?
for
Right.
sure.
So I was like, I could do that. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, you know what? I really can do that. I'm gonna figure out how to do that. And this was maybe a year ago. And I was like, I'm gonna find a way to do it. I'm gonna find some hosts that I know, but like not just because I know them, they gotta be able to talk about various different
Yeah.
topics. And then I kept bumping into TD downtown because we both work in the downtown sector. And I kept bumping into him, and we'd have these crazy conversations where sometimes we're almost at each other's neck, and I'm like, this is like a podcast. And he
Yeah.
was like, it is like a podcast. And I'm like, we should make a podcast.
There we go.
And honestly, it was really just as simple as that. Like the main thing that inspired this was the infamous barbershop talk where we were having the conversation, who's better, Biggie or Tupac?
Right.
And I'm a Biggie guy, and I grew up on Biggie. So if I know a lot of people when I do this, it doesn't go well. But I'm a huge Biggie fan.
Right.
I was just voicing my opinion why I thought Biggie was better. Not taking any away from Pac. I think Pac it can go either way. But
Right.
I was kind of voicing my opinion why I thought he was the guy, and TD wasn't really rocking with that, and we just kept butting heads. Then it became the infamous Nas and Jay-Z conversation,
Ooh.
and it was just so many different things that were happening. So I was like, you know what? I'm really gonna do this. Like I'm really gonna actively apply myself and take the steps to put this podcast together and really make it happen. And that's kind of what inspired me to do it.
It's interesting because listening to like podcasts, a good podcast that has multiple hosts that use like debates as
Yeah.
like their main thing is having people who can have difference of opinions without attacking someone else's opinion. Like I
Yes.
don't need to make my point better than yours by taking shots at yours. I
Hmm.
just have to do a better job of explaining and giving
Right.
points as to why I am correct in believing in X, Y, and Z, as opposed to, the Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, where it's like attacking almost like the character of the other person to further
Yeah.
emphasize your point.
Yeah. I find that that's kind of like a maturity thing and like an ego thing. If you can just
Yeah,
have like, because there's so many conversations we even have where you have one view and I have another view. And it's like, I respect your view and you respect my view. And it becomes a comedic thing. And it just, what I mean, starts debates and good conversation,
for
right?
sure.
And at the end of the day, I might not end up agreeing with what you're saying, or you might not agree with what I'm saying. But at the end of the conversation, you'll probably have a better understanding of what I'm saying, and I'll have a better understanding of what you're saying. So
Right.
I just really like that active conversation, because sometimes that person will sway you to go, you know what, I am wrong and you're right. Just like you were saying on the pod on my last episode, sometimes they got to get me in check, because sometimes I
Yeah.
just veer off and I just go on a rant and start talking about a topic. Go, whoa, Reno, relax, relax. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you kind of need to just be able to reel it back. It's not ego driven. Everybody's cool here. There's no bad vibes. So when you look at it that way, I find that's where you get the best conversations, and you could debate with someone without it seeming like such an aggressive, like there shouldn't be tension in the air. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Open conversation.
Yeah. No, listening to your episodes, like you guys have that amazing rapport. Barbershop was like the best. Barbershop talk is like the best way to describe it because it really what it is, right? Like you said, age old arguments and debates. Pac, Biggie, Nas, Jay Z,
Of course.
Whitney, and I don't know who would go up against Whitney
Mariah
Houston,
Carey.
Mariah Carey. There we go. See,
Yeah.
I mean, like you have so many good topics, so many lots of knowledge that you guys showcased during the pod. You talked about your analytics for your podcast. I'm just curious, what is the biggest surprise when it comes to the reach your podcast has had? Like what's like the coolest location that you've seen is like, oh man, they're listening to the podcast there.
Okay, I'll go. I'll say a few.
Okay.
Nigeria threw me off.
Okay.
Australia really surprised me.
All
And
right.
Ireland.
Ireland. Okay.
That that was really odd to me. That threw me off. I was like, where did that one come from? And
Interesting.
honestly, like across Canada, like certain places in like New Brunswick, like we have a bunch of listeners in New Brunswick, and I would have never, I don't even know anyone in New Brunswick. And you know what I mean? It just kind of surprised me to have reach out in places like that. Even if we're
Shout
talking
out the East
more,
Coast.
exactly, just if we're going to shout out more Canada. But yeah, the biggest surprises for me was definitely Australia, Nigeria, and Ireland. That was,
Wow.
that surprised me.
Listen, man, the Politics as Usual podcast taking over the world.
Slowly but surely, we're all going to do it.
That's
The
it.
big
That's
old,
it.
the big old podcast, Politics as Usual podcast. It's all a movement. Canada's like a sector that hasn't really been tapped into. You know what I mean? Like
For sure.
everything is relatively new here when we're talking the entertainment industry, and especially with podcasting being a new, relatively new industry. We could say
Yeah,
like seeing the deals like the $100 million with Joe Rogan
that's
with
right.
Spotify, like it's just getting bigger and bigger, and us being in a place that is a hotbed for talent, but it hasn't really been tapped into yet. We're in a great place right now.
And you brought it up. Spotify made some big moves in 2019 and 2020, buying The Ringer from Bill Simmons. That was a
Yes,
huge get. I mean, the platform that he has when it comes to podcasts, if there's anyone that I would say is up there, it would be, Bill Simmons with the quantity
of
of
course.
podcasts that he has under his umbrella at The Ringer. And then you have Joe Rogan, who it might be the GOAT right? When it comes to podcasting, when you look at, how much viewership he gets, how much money he was making on his own, and the
Yeah.
fact that he negotiated his own deal where he lost no creative control for his podcast. It was just a licensing deal. Because then recently, and you and I have talked about this in the podcast world, Joe Budden had a very public disagreement with what happened with Spotify. He was with Spotify. That was the platform that he was with. He allegedly asked for something like $250 million in order to stay on to sign like a new deal. And, Charlemagne and his buddy Andrew Schultz from the, Brilliant Idiots podcast sort of talked about it a little bit, as well as I think it was the Flagrant 2 podcast, where they were saying, maybe he asked for too much money. But then you hear Joe Budden, not a podcast I have ever really listened to up until sort of his rebuttal. And he really talked about, being an owner as opposed to a pawn, really getting paid your worth. And it sort of changed my opinion of the matter, because why not ask? Why not ask for that amount of money if you feel like you are worth it, right?
Yeah, it's true. I just think that with these major corporations, it works a lot better as a partnership, because like
Right.
the music industry has a long history of artists being taken advantage of.
No doubt.
With the infamous 360 deal, where they're just taking money from you. They give you your advance in the beginning, and most of these artists don't have financial literacy, so they get that advance thinking that that's just their money. They start spending all this money not knowing that they got to pay that money back to the label.
Yeah.
They drop a hot album, the label recoups all that money from the advance they gave you.
Yeah.
Now you don't have as much money, but you spent your money buying cars and trying to ball out and live a lifestyle that you actually your account doesn't say you can live this kind of lifestyle. You know what I mean? So I just hope that the podcast industry doesn't kind of have to go through that same kind of vibe, because that's not really, that's not progressive. In the long run, it helps these big time streaming services blow themselves up and, what I mean, make trillions, billions, whatever, however many dollars they make. I just think, let's just break bread. This is a relatively new industry. Let's just do good business. That's how I feel about it. So I don't know if everything Joe's saying is accurate, and I don't know if everything Spotify is saying is accurate. And like we both said, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
100%.
There's a good chance it's somewhere in the middle. But I just think you just gotta be civil. We're doing business here. Let's not scam each other. Let's be honest. If you think you're worth 250 million and they say, hey, we don't want to give you the 250, that's business. Not everybody's gonna want to pay what you want.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So we'll see where this industry goes.
And it's interesting because like you use the music industry, which has had like a long history, right? Like it's been around forever. And you've seen guys like Chance the Rapper, for instance, be able to release his own music.
Yes.
Right. And so owning your originals is like the greatest thing that you can do. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, I don't want to say just rappers, because I mean, Kesha has had probably one of the most public disagreements when it comes to her music, that she doesn't own anything. She feels like she's owned by Dr. whomever. I can't remember the guy's name. But she doesn't even own like her music. She's forced to play out the rest of her contract that she signed and or negotiated, or had a terrible manager or agent. And she's sort of in that pickle. Whereas podcasts, really, if you have your own website, you can own everything. But it's really set up that you can get started and reach places like Ireland or Nigeria without having a major backer own your podcast. You can do it wherever you want to in your home office. You just need a good quality mic and a good recorder for your computer, or, like a pocket recorder. And you can really take your podcast anywhere. And there's not a lot of people, unless, you go like iHeartRadio has the Breakfast Club's podcast syndicated on them. Now, they're not recording anything specific. They're just regurgitating the audio from their syndicated radio show and putting it into a podcast form where it's archived.
Yeah.
but you could jump on and submit for free on Spotify, Apple,
Yep.
iHeart, any
Yep.
of these places and reap the benefits of whatever you put into it. So I'm hopeful, as you said, that the industry sort of leads us in a place where people can be more successful. We don't have to fall into the same issues that the music industry ran into, where it was just a few corporations playing puppeteer and profiting off of everybody who wanted to get paid.
Yeah. I'm really hoping that that's the way it goes. When I hear stories like Joe Budden's, it makes
Yeah,
me cringe a bit.
for
I'm like,
sure.
ugh. But at the end of the day, he negotiated his deal,
That's
right?
right.
It's just a matter of I don't know if they followed through with what they claimed they were supposed to do for him. That's a
Right.
whole other thing, and we'll never really know,
Yeah.
right? So I just I'm on the fences with that one. I just hope, you know what I mean? I just really hope that going forward, business is done well because Joe Rogan's deal is that's nice. That 100 sounds real nice about now to every podcaster that's trying to start. So if anybody out here who's listening to this is really trying to do something of that nature, apply yourself and go for it because you never know where you will end up. Sorry.
For sure. I mean, and it almost seems like almost every podcast we see now is sponsored by Manscaped. So Manscaped, if you're listening, like I'm taking, I'll get some ads going for you, no problem.
Yeah, yeah.
The
And
big
that's
old,
sponsorship money.
yeah,
There's a lot of that going around too. Like, so people get your business together if you want to do something like this and take it serious, and you could definitely get it done. Because I was
100%.
just a person who had an idea, and you were just a person who had an idea, and then you apply yourself, and now we're both here with our respective podcasts coming together and forming Voltron today. So
I like that. Very nice. Voltron. Now I want to get into you because like this podcast, when I wanted to have you on, I love your politics as usual podcast, but I want to get to know, Reno a little bit better. Now, surprise it to me, like I didn't know much about you, but your brother did explain a few things.
yeah,
Fairly, pretty highly recruited
yeah,
football player.
yes.
So let go into your story. When did you start playing football? What teams and offers did you sort of flirt with? And then what ultimately ended, where did you end up going down the road? Because obviously you're not in the NFL right now. So things
Yeah,
changed a little bit from what the plan
yeah,
was. But take
sure.
us through your journey a little bit with football.
So I started off at a summer league in the OMFL, and I was playing for the Tie Cats.
Okay.
And this was I believe I was like in grade 9 at the time. And I was playing one game and I was just rocking kids on the sideline. Like, and I just seen this big dude in a suit that was just watching us playing and going, get him, Ababio, get him. And I'm like, who is this guy on this? Who is this guy? And he's saying my name. I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
So at the end of that game, because I didn't even play, I played summer football for maybe like 1 year, right?
Okay.
And then the same dude that was on the sideline ended up being Rob Ford.
Oh, wow.
So Rob Ford approached me and he said, if you want, like, if you're serious about football and you want to, like, try and take it somewhere, I definitely think like you should, transfer to the school that I'm coaching at. Because the school I was at, they didn't even have football at all. A lot of schools in Toronto at that time did
Right.
not have football. I believe even now a lot of them don't.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I actually want to go. And my mom was kind of like, football? Like, huh? Are you crazy? Like, people are butting each other's heads, like getting concussions. Like, you really want to do that? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take the chance and do it. And then Rob Ford ended up talking to my mom, and my mom was like, because my mom is one of those people where she doesn't really trust politicians at all. So my mom looked back at me
Smart
after
lady.
and was like, this is on you. This is what
Yeah.
you want. I don't care what he's telling me right now, really, but it's all about what you want to do. So I ended up taking the opportunity. I ended up playing linebacker over there, and I played safety in my last year. I got MVP of the team in my last year.
Nice.
We had some tough losses. We lost against Birchmount that had a track star. I can't even remember his name right now. He ended up going to USC actually. I think Andre Brown, I believe his name was.
Okay.
Speedster wide receiver. They ended up beating us by 1 point, 20-21.
That's
That one
rough.
alone will kill me. That one was the playoff game. That one always will kill me. But and I ended up doing that. And in my last year, I made it into the top 100 in Ontario.
Oh wow. Nice.
So with that, I ended up getting schools like Simon Fraser University talking to me. I ended up having, of course, York University and UFT. Those schools were trying to talk to me too. I had a couple opportunities in like some lower level American teams. Wayne State was one of them that was reaching out to me for a possible situation. And at the time, I was dealing with a lot of family issues at the same time.
Right.
So I was like, that jumping to the States or leaving, because I passed my SAT and all that type of stuff. So it was like just jumping to the States, I didn't feel comfortable
Right.
doing that yet, but like I knew that's where I wanted to go with it. So then I ended up going to a junior college in Montreal.
Okay.
It was a CJEP. I went there for 1 year, and then I was supposed to transfer after that to a university either in the States or Simon, or I was going to go to Simon Fraser because they were in NCAA, I believe, Division 3.
Yeah.
They were the only school
In
in Canada
Canada. Yeah.
that was actually in there. So I was like, you know what? That's an opportunity. I'd rather do something like that. But then unfortunately, I wasn't able to proceed on. I ended up having to handle those issues I was dealing with at home. And that's what kind of derailed that opportunity for me. And at the time, personally for me, I was looking at it as like, damn, like really could have did it. You know what I mean? Really,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But it didn't take me long. With me, I'm a grinder. Like I'm all about getting to it. So mentally, I had to just reposition myself, and I took some years to just kind of figure out what I really wanted to do with my life. You know what I mean? And I had some struggles. It wasn't easy. You know what I mean? I had my moments where I was like, man, what am I gonna do? What do I really like doing? And then this whole media thing just started to pop off, and there was so many different opportunities and like entrepreneurship. I hate working for people. I am not
Right.
a fan of work of somebody telling me when I gotta get. I just don't like it. I've never been built that way. I just don't like it. So I told myself I'm gonna do whatever it takes. If I gotta keep working for someone to eventually work for myself, I'm gonna do that. So I just started taking those steps and applying myself and working towards doing that. And then now you see me here. I have my Politics as Usual podcast. I'm actually producing a show. COVID kind of stopped that, but I was actually producing a show called Dropping Jewels. It's going to be like a YouTube web series where I actually
Nice.
go to various different jewelers that are like that do custom jewelry within the hip hop community, and they were actually
Nice.
going to break down their whole custom jewelry setup and how they go about creating some of the pieces that you see on like your favorite artists and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So that's on the way, 2021. So
Okay, here we
I
go.
got various little like web series and docu series I'm working on. So I'm just pushing the entrepreneurship thing and just trying to dip my hand in everything I ever wanted to try. Because you just never know until you try. You know what I mean? You really never know. I've seen too many people die and they never really got to tap into all the things that they could have did in life. You know what I mean? They say
For
one of the
sure.
worst things is to be old and sit there with regret.
100%. Now, it's interesting because one of the things that I talked to your brother about when speaking about you
Mhm.
early on was, he really praised the fact that you were not just wanting to be an entrepreneur, because it's very easy to be like, oh, I have this dream that I want to do,
Mhm.
but not very many people work towards it. And
Yeah.
so you took courses and classes and programs and mentorship, and you put in the work while also having like a full-time job because you knew that that was the only way that you were going to be able to move to the goal that you had set, which was be able to do all of these things. And you come from a very like creative family.
Yes. A lot of artists.
100%, right? And with artists it can be challenging because there's always a tons of ideas, but then being able to follow up on it and pursue it
Mhm.
and make it into something, it's hard. And when you put your heart and soul into something and it doesn't work out the way you want it to, it can be disheartening. But as you said, a grinder,
Yeah.
you're going to find a way. It may not be a conventional way. It may not be, through door number 1, 2, or 3, but door number 4 looks pretty good. Door number
Yep.
5 is even better.
Yep.
And you're going to figure it out. And for people who are wanting to do this, what would be the one thing that you feel that you learned the most in your mentorship program that you took part in?
What I would say, if like, first off, I'll say this: if with this whole COVID thing and everybody wearing masks and everything, like everything socially has been somewhat shut down, even though they're
Yeah.
starting to open things up slowly as things go along. I recommend to people that you study the back house of your business. A
Okay.
lot of people worry about the glitz and glamour. Like, I want my camera to look right, I
Yeah.
want my logo to look amazing, but it's like, is your business registered? Do you know what streaming service you're going to use? You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're a music artist, you have your tune course so you can get distribution. If you're a podcaster, do you have Buzzsprout? Do you have your Podbean account? You
Yeah.
know, I really say get the back house in order. If you're going to trademark your name or whatever it may be, write everything down and really break down those things first. I would say
Right.
go about doing those things first, because if you just, let's say you do have a great podcast and you do get all the great cameras and everything, and then somebody else goes and trademarks your name, or someone else, you know what I mean? You're
Yeah,
screwed. That's theirs now. That's
for
happened
sure.
to artists. That's happened to people where they had an idea. They didn't do the due diligence to make sure everything was trademarked and locked in. And then somebody else came in, and now you got to pay them a bunch of money to get your own idea back. So
Yeah.
I would just, my main thing I would recommend to anybody trying to do a podcast or just anything when it comes to being an entrepreneur or just self-employed is just do all your research. It'll save you a lot of trouble in the long run, because there's things that I didn't know in the beginning that I wish if I knew, it would have made things a little bit easier for me. And
But
actually, after I made the first mistake, because I had the recorder, I ended up having an audio interface that I was using,
yeah.
and it wasn't the greatest. And then you recommend the Zoom, so I ended up getting that, and then everything was good to go from there. So it's like, just do your research with that, with whatever it is you want to do, and be sure about the moves you make. Be calculated. Don't just do it to do it. Do it with a purpose. That'd be the main thing I recommend to anybody that's trying to get into the entrepreneurship type sector or just self-employed or anything like that. Just do your research. It will save you a lot of trouble.
And
That's the main.
don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Like don't be afraid to get advice from someone who
Yes.
knows what they're doing or has been in the game longer or who's even coming up at the same time, right? Like you could be like you and I, our ideas for the podcast started roughly around the same time. We
Yeah.
both started talking relatively early into what we wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I was maybe like, I'll say like 2 weeks into it, maybe further along than you are from
Yeah.
like the recording
Yeah.
standpoint. So when it came to production, I was a little bit more advanced.
Yes.
Now, I gave you some ideas, I gave you some thoughts.
To a lot of
Ultimately,
a lot of things that I did, like even because I was looking at Buzzsprout at the time,
yeah,
and moved me to the Podbean, and I was like, I ended up looking at both of them and then made my own decision. And I went with Podbean. You know what I
that's it
mean? So it's all about just learning and not being hard headed and thinking I know everything, because I
for
don't.
sure.
You know what I mean? And if somebody could teach me something or I could teach you something, why would I not do it?
100%, right? And sometimes in an entrepreneur world, sometimes people are reluctant to help others out, right? Because they see it as, you're going to take away from my bottom line. Therefore, you figure it out on your own. I'm not going to help you. But the thing is, where we are, we're a community. We're a community of people trying to get the same thing. And while some of our topics may be very similar, I don't look at you as competition or you as me as competition or anything like that. We're going to help each other. Because why? Because that's how you elevate everybody. When one person succeeds, everybody succeeds. And
And I would,
and that's what we want to do, right?
of course, and I would say to anybody who does think like that, remember that I can never be you and you can never be me.
That's right.
Just being you is what separates you from other people. So just
100%.
tap into being unique. We can both talk about the same thing, but we have different perspectives. Just like you said, some
100%.
topics may be similar. Like you might be talking about the same thing I'm talking about one week, but we're going to have different perspectives. You're going to deliver it different, and I'm going to deliver it different. And some
Yeah,
people are going to listen to both, you know what I mean, to
that's
hear
right.
different perspectives. So it doesn't take anything away from you. That's how I look at it. A lot of people look at it as, oh man, it's taken away from me. But you're you and they're them. They can't do what you do, and you can't do what they do.
Well, I mean, even early on, right? So we were talking a little bit about the production side of it, but then you had this opportunity where you were attending some of these like webinars, and you
Yeah.
shot me the link being like, "Hey, if you're interested in doing this." And that's not something I would have ever found on my own. I never would have come across it.
Mhm.
And I was extremely grateful for the opportunity because it got to connect me with a few other people and see
Sure.
what everyone's sort of doing, right?
Mhm.
And then you take that information, you figure out how it's going to work for you. But again, it's those small things where we help each other out that allows people to be successful and not to be selfish. And in a time like this where we can't socialize, a lot of people are taking up, Instagram and FaceTiming and WhatsApp calling with people. That's
Yeah.
their only way of social engagement. Um, the social media use when it comes to like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram has like gone up like 300% from the beginning of February.
I heard that. I heard that.
People are just glued to their phones, and their only form of interaction is, through
Definitely.
their social media. Let's build strong connections. Let's get to know people, because honestly, if COVID doesn't happen, who knows where we both are at this point, right?
Yeah.
Who knows where the politics as usual podcast would be, with some of the stuff that's going on now. I don't know. I mean, the good thing about COVID, the thing that sort of changed my idea for this podcast is it made a lot of people more available than they probably would have been had there not been COVID. You know,
Sure.
I think back to some of my guests like a Cabby or a Tim McAuliffe or, an Eric Smith or John Anik as a UFC commentator who are they really in their schedules going to be, jumping on and doing a Zoom podcast? Like Zoom probably benefited the most from COVID because every
Right.
university and school ended up using a lot of it for getting their programming across.
Yep. For sure. I like it's interesting to see how everybody kind of just pivoted.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And everybody was like, okay, well, I can't see people as much, but now because I can go on a Zoom chat and everybody's at home, I can connect with people that I normally would not be able to connect with, like you were saying earlier. And it's
for
just
sure.
great to see. Like I was watching some clips from your Cabby episode literally before we started shooting this episode, and it's like it's great to see. Like it's great to see those connections being made because now that you interview somebody like that, when you shoot off a message to somebody else and they go, okay, let me see what the big old podcast is about, and then they see the catalog of people you've talked to, some
Yeah,
of them are going to go, if Cabby will go on that, then I'll go on that. Or
for sure.
if these caliber of people are going on this podcast, then I'll go on. Why would I not? It all falls in line, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's great. A lot of people have been capitalizing like you have during this whole COVID-19 pandemic thing.
Now, what you said is very true because I've run into that with some of my future guests. Now, it takes a little bit of whining and dining when it comes to some of these guests.
Snoozing.
Yeah. So and it's like you said, sometimes like early on dealing with like Cabby or Tim McAuliffe, you're not dealing with like agents or PR people or anything like that. You're just dealing with the person who runs their social media account, which is them.
Mm,
But in reaching out with some people who I have coming in, the off season of baseball, I have a fairly prominent Major League Baseball player coming on in a few weeks
okay.
when the season ends. One of the things they asked me was, hey, can you send us a few episodes of your podcast so we can get the feel for it? And so I'm thinking like exactly what you just said.
Mm,
Hit them with a Cabby and a Tim McAuliffe, something that's sort of in their area where they can say, oh, I can see how this episode is going to go. I can see the kinds of questions that he's going to ask, and they look for that catalog to see, it might be they go on Instagram and see how many blue checks has he had on his
Yes.
podcast, because
Yeah.
that's a big thing, right? So it's interesting. My advice for anybody is shoot your shot. What's the worst someone could say to you is no,
That's
right?
the first thing.
But you could have the benefit of having someone who's like, you know what, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I've been more fortunate than not when it comes to my podcast, and I've had Cabby on twice. I've been able to stay in communication with, a Donovan Bennett and a Tim McAuliffe, who have helped me with future episodes when it comes to other guys. But it's I'm thankful for COVID, because honestly, this podcast probably would have looked a lot different
Yeah.
had COVID not happened.
But it's good to see that you're executing and making those things happen, because now, like, other people that may listen to this are going to be like, wow, like, he started off and he was just shooting off emails and just taking a chance, taking a shot in the dark. And then after it actually worked out. And once you get the ball rolling, it's easy, because once you have a catalog of certain types of people that you've interviewed and talked to on your podcast, it is nothing for you to go start talking to other people. Because just like you said, one of the first things they said was, can we see other episodes? Who have you talked to? You know what I mean? Those things are what are going to elevate you to the next level. You got to start.
Sure.
A lot of people come into this and they just they want it to be a quick thing. They want it to just be a quick blow up. Like, I do my little thing and it blows up. And when they don't blow up right away, it deters them from doing it. Like you were saying earlier, when COVID started, I'm sure there was a lot of podcasts that were just beginning. And I'm sure there is not as many now that we're at this point in this whole pandemic. You know what I mean? It's all about just getting the ball rolling, because sometimes all it takes is that one episode, and then boom, you blow up. Like, we're in a time where people just go viral.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not an overnight thing. As much as people think it's overnight, that person's been hustling. It's just you just got introduced to them, but they've been doing this.
Like, if you look at TikTok, 15-year-old star Charlie D'Amelio, is now like a household name for anyone from the age of like 13 to 25 who's viewing TikTok. And this girl was like a dancer and had one video blow up, and she has now like the most followers on TikTok and has like her own drink at Dunkin' Donuts in the States, because like that's all she drinks. Yeah, it's crazy. But that's what people see when they want to start something. They just see let me get that one-time click. It's just going to be this one video, this hot take. It's going to be something, but there's way more that goes into the longevity of being able to sustain something like that. Yeah. And it's putting in the work. It's all the background stuff, like you mentioned earlier. Yep. Making sure you own your business. Mm-hmm. You put in all of the work ahead of time. Whereas we're in now such a stage of instant gratification that, people post photos, and if they don't post it at the right time or don't get the right likes, they pull it down.
I know.
And then post it in a prime time, because they think that, that's going to be their better shot, or just completely delete it and start again another time. So it's interesting. I'm not from that generation. Yeah. I told my wife when I was starting this, if 10 people listen to my podcast, I'm okay. Because this podcast is about me enjoying conversations with people who have meant something to me or I find interesting. But there's always going to be, a rhyme or reason that this person is coming on. Mm-hmm. And if 1 million people listen to it, even better. Like, that's cool.
Yep. And when you have that mentality, you got to do it because you love it. Like, if you didn't get any money or any revenue from this or any sponsors, you would still do this because you love it.
For sure.
If I didn't make any profit off of this podcast, I would still do it, because I still know that I can use this to do other things.
100%.
There's always a way. If this thing doesn't make you money, you can use it to make money other ways, or whatever it is. If it's something you're trying to monetize.
Right.
People are just doing it strictly for the love of it, and wherever it goes, that's a bonus for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think it's all about really just knowing what you really want to do with it and just enjoying the ride. Because it's enjoyable when you love it. When you don't love it, it's not a good time.
Yeah. Like next week, I'm jumping on someone's podcast who reached out to me and was like,
Okay.
hey, you want to jump on our podcast? We think you'd be like a great guest. And I was like, okay. I started listening to like their episodes, and I'm listening to like the intros of like these people who are successful business people or former athletes. And I'm like, what the hell is my intro going to be? Hey, I'm like a father of two who does a podcast in his basement. Just kind of have a lot of fun with it. And that's
No,
like my intro.
it's Julian from the Big Old Podcast.
That's right. That's it. You know what? You're going to be my PR guy from now on, you know, and I have to write my intro speech. I'm going to come to you.
Sometimes it's as simple as that. It's
Yeah.
official. Because all they got to do is type in Big Old Podcast now, and boom, you pop up.
That's
Right
it.
away, you got them.
That's it. You know, it's fun. Now, I do want to get into you because, you know, this has been a lot of fun.
Yes.
I feel like we probably talk for hours.
Of course.
But I do have to bring up a few things. Now, your brother said,
Yeah.
well-oiled machine. You were a specimen when it came to football, and you explained it too when it came to, you know, just running over dudes and MVP in your final season. Now, some people may not believe this. This is obviously more of it went from like this California hippie kind of trend to really more of a movement. But what surprised me was that you're a vegan, right?
Yes. Yes.
How have you been able to maintain that healthy lifestyle of being also like a well finely tuned athlete on a plant-based diet?
Well, for me, in the beginning, I was losing weight, to be completely honest with you, because I didn't know how to really, like, I didn't know my portions. I just knew I'm eating vegetables. That's kind of how I looked at it in the beginning, right? Because I've seen a lot of these wild videos of how they like, treat animals and how our food gets to us, and it just freaked me out. So I was like, let me, because my brother actually, he eats chicken, but he doesn't eat like pork or stuff like that, right? So he actually was the one that took me to, I think it was Harvey's once when I was younger. And I'm a very picky eater at that time. Now I'm way more open-minded. And he gets me a veggie burger, but he doesn't say anything. So I'm halfway through the burger. I'm like, this is amazing. And he looks at me, sly, schmuck. He looks at me and just goes, you know, it's a veggie burger, right? I'm about to open my mouth to be like, it does. He's like,
Yeah.
And from there, I was more open-minded to it. And years later, I ended up just tapping into the whole vegan lifestyle. And it's a journey. It's not for everyone. I'll say it's definitely not for everyone. And as like, if you're an athlete and you're trying to do it, like you got to really know your portions, get all your protein. You got to make sure you're getting everything because you want to still maintain your size, depending on what kind of athlete you are.
Right.
You maybe want to like maintain your size, or maybe if you're just like a sprinter or a marathon runner, size doesn't really matter to you. So it's just a matter of just changing your diet and having like your basic vegan diet. But for me, I found the best way to transition was remove one thing at a time. So I removed pork, then I removed beef, and then I removed chicken. So that's kind of how I went. I did it slowly. I didn't do it overnight. Some people go cold turkey. I made it a process where I waited about like a year, and I just slowly started taking things away. And from then, I knew I was good to go. So for me, that was probably the way I transitioned. A lot of people look at me like, "How did you do it?" Because compared to when I played to now, I'm leaner, but I feel better.
Right.
So it's weird. Like if you looked at my physique then, it may look better to people.
Right.
The way I feel now is better than back then.
And that's the important thing, right? Like every person is different. So every diet or intake or calories, all of that is going to, depend on your body.
Yeah.
Right. And cold turkey can work sometimes. Sometimes it can just shut a body down. But most people do it the way you did it, right? Elimination diet and vegans. And I appreciate vegans, because I feel like I'm the counterbalance to you guys with all the meat you don't eat. Like that's what I consume, and all the veggies that I don't eat, I know that it's being taken care of by people like you. So I feel like we're the perfect harmony in the world. I could not thrive if it wasn't for people like you.
So pork, beef, everything's on the table for you.
No pork, no pork. I am a Muslim, so there's no pork. That is
Okay,
haram.
okay, okay,
That's
okay.
it. But chicken, beef, fish. You know, having your brother over for dinner, I do know it's either chicken or shrimp. Those are like the two
Yeah.
main things that he will eat,
Yes. Yes.
um, and so it's again, I come from like a Middle Eastern family and a Mexican family, so I mean, um, my wife being from Afghanistan, we get lots of like curries and rice, so that's always good for me. And then,
Of
my
course.
Spanish and Trini side, we're always about like the curry chicken and the curry goats and the jerk chicken, all that kind of stuff. So like I eat well. I eat well. I hide behind this hoodie, but I eat well.
No, I hear you. I remember the curry chicken days.
Uh,
I sometimes I miss it, but I just curry up some chickpeas now, throw it in a
that's
little
it.
wrap. I'm good to go.
I actually, it's funny you say that because I actually feel like Trinidadians could transition pretty well to being a vegan because there's a lot
Yeah.
of like chickpeas or spinach that is
Yep.
high in their diet, and so eliminating a little bit of that, like chicken or beef, it's not too bad. It ain't for me. I ain't doing it. I gotta support the
Yeah.
meat being eaten and consumed in the world because we have to have that perfect balance. But
Sure.
I found it interesting when your brother brought it up, and he actually told me about the Harvey story, which
Yes.
a little bit sneaky, but I mean led you
Well
down
played. I
the
wasn't
right
even
path.
mad at it. I was if I didn't like the burger though, I
Yeah,
definitely wouldn't have been happy. But I liked it. I what could I really say?
yeah. I'm a meat connoisseur. My wife tried that one time, and I was like, I ain't about this life. I know this ain't made from meat products. This tastes different to me. Pass. Not
Sniffed it out
sneaky like
right
your
away.
brother. Yeah. All right, so we talked a little bit of podcast. I wanted to get into a little bit of the NBA before I let you go. Um, Obviously, my dad is currently not talking to me. He's avoiding my calls as he is an LA Clipper fan. Um, Me being a Laker fan, quite happy that the balance has restored with people in their right minds to understand that can't cheer for a team that is just as bad, if not worse history than the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even.
Uh,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Listen, the Clippers haven't. They're like, I saw this meme. Top like 10 teams in LA for basketball. Lakers number one.
Mhm.
I think like the Sparks were number 2 or 3. UCLA basketball. Venice pickup. YMCA drop in. Intermurals, and then like the last one was like the LA Clippers, and it's so true. It's so true. But the only thing that made me feel a little bit better than the Clippers losing was all of these Toronto fans when the Raptors were eliminated by the Boston Celtics. And I'm not a hater,
Yes.
but what I can't wrap my head around
Okay.
are the type of franchises that win one championship in like a million years
Mhm.
and their fan base just doesn't stop talking about the championship. All I
Yeah.
heard during COVID was like longest champions for one season, 420 something days that we're NBA
Yeah.
champions, and they canceled the season. We'll be back to back. And I'm just like, give it a rest, guys. It's over. And
I knew
when,
before I left it wasn't happening. I'm gonna be
yeah,
honest. I was very aware that was we were not gonna win it this year. I was very aware. I thought we would have been able to possibly beat the Celtics, but I did not think we were gonna. I think it's LeBron's year if you ask me.
for sure. It's lining
Wow.
up that way.
He's a man on a mission right now. He's a man on a mission. And for me, I'm kind of neutral. I'm really more of a football guy. I definitely know basketball. I pay attention, but when it comes to like having a specific team that I go for, I
Yeah,
don't really have a specific team. I kind of just watch and I enjoy it, right?
right.
And just for the whole comedic effect, I really enjoyed seeing the Raptors lose, but then having the last laugh watching the Clippers lose.
Yeah. Yeah,
seeing
for sure.
Kawhi leave us, doing us how he did us. And honestly, it's up to the players at the end of the day. They play where they want to play, right? But it was just
100%.
very ironic to see him leave, and he's on this stacked team with Paul George and Beverly and all these players that are supposed to come together and make it happen. And then Denver comes through with a Canadian on the team,
From
and he's
Kitchener, Ontario.
balling out.
Oh yeah.
I love seeing that. That's great basketball right there. Upsets, I love it.
Again, if you want to talk about the comedic side of things, the roast of the LA Clippers that took place during the final minutes from CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard on Twitter
Yeah.
was some of the greatest entertaining tweets I'd ever seen in my life. Because when Dame Lillard got eliminated, right? Pat Beverly, Paul George, they were making jokes about, book your ticket to Cancun, have fun. They're waving bye to him, all of this stuff. And then CJ and Dame just went in on these two guys, and it was that sort of fitting thing. For Toronto fans, Kawhi going to a place, and it came out recently within the last week, Kawhi had said during his, wooing by Toronto and the LA Clippers and Lakers, he said he didn't think that Toronto had the pieces to repeat. And then he goes to the LA Clippers, basically forces them to trade for Paul George, mortgage their future with all of these guys who are potentially free agents in this offseason. And there's a chance that, in 2 years, he may not even be an LA Clipper anymore. He may have to go to another team because he didn't have the success that he thought he was going to have in that LA market.
Isn't it beautiful? It's wonderful.
It's poetic.
It's poetic.
Very poetic. It's
I love it. It makes for great stories, great timelines. Like, think about everybody's mind state when Kawhi left. People thought Kawhi was going to LA to go face LeBron. Like, we thought that's what's going to happen. And whoever wins there then goes on. You know what I mean? And to see them not even make it there, and we got Denver that was probably on no one's radar.
Right.
When it comes to going that far, and they pull off the upset, it's great. It kind of reminds me of back when I believe it was Golden State with Baron Davis when they upset
Dallas Mavericks.
Yep, when they upset the Mavs.
That's
it
right.
kind of gave me that energy, like, because everybody was like, "This is the Clippers, like they got pumped."
Yeah.
Kawhi, they got it, and then you just seen Denver come through and just ball out, push it to Game 7. Doc Rivers on the sideline sweating. It was a beautiful sight. It was a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it was nice to not see Steve Ballmer jumping around like a giddy little kid, He has to eat some humble pie and take his team to Anaheim because there is only one LA team. There is one market. And the other thing that I don't like, Doc Rivers, get out of here with trying to hide the championships that the Lakers have won. You're in the house that the Lakers built. Staples Center is where the Lakers, that's their arena, which is why they obviously want to leave. But don't cover it up. Use that as inspiration to have one of your, what is it? Conference champions, maybe. Actually, no, they can't even make it to the conference championship. My bad. I forgot. They're like 0 whatever in second round playoff matchups.
How many
Take
times
your ass out of LA.
Sorry to cut you off. How many times has Doc been up 3-1 and then teams came back and won?
I think it was 3 times. Once with Orlando.
Right?
Yeah, he did once with Orlando.
Okay.
Once with, obviously, the Clippers.
Yeah.
Did he do it twice with the Clippers? I can't remember.
Maybe. I'm not too sure.
I can't remember if I think they lost to Houston. I don't know if they were up 3-1, but it was in that the Blake era of the LA Clippers. Yeah, I think it was in that era, and then obviously you have this one. But you know who doesn't give up 3-1 leads in the playoffs? LeBron James. Just saying.
He's an animal. Shout out to LeBron. He's an animal. And he's probably one of the best personalities outside of basketball. Like all
100%.
does in the community and stuff. Like, you have certain other greats, I won't say their names, that don't have that same, you know what I mean, love within the community. You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
So it's great to see what LeBron's doing. He has the school, you know what I mean? He's fighting
Yep.
for
Yeah, I promise school.
schooling.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He was one of the few people that was in the room saying that they didn't wanna go and play any basketball. And for someone like him who is probably gonna win the championship that year, it takes a lot to put that aside to, you know, stand up for social issues. So I definitely respect LeBron.
Yeah, there are a few athletes that can transcend in sports and transcend in the world, right? I
Yeah.
made reference to this when I spoke with Cabby. I put LeBron James in the same category as a Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali in his prime gave up being the heavyweight champion, went to jail because he refused to fight in a war he didn't believe in. You know,
Yeah.
I believe he said, the Viet Cong ain't done nothing to me, and he wasn't going to fight in that war. And he went to jail. He got known as a draft dodger. Um, it but he stood up for what he believed in. And we don't always get athletes, although they're the ones who are often looked to in times like this. Oh, what is he going to do? What is LeBron going to do? And LeBron, right, wrong, or indifferent, has the big shoulders in order to be able to hold on to that and say, yeah, you know what, I'll speak on this. I'm going
Yeah.
to do this. And when it came to the Jacob Blake shooting, once the NBA was in the bubble, he was one of the people to say, "Hey, listen, I don't want to let's boycott these games. There are things that are bigger than us. We thought we could come here and make a big difference. And the Raptors had their Black Lives Matter bus. They were wearing all of the nicknames, not the nicknames, but they were able to choose from a list of things that they could list on the back of their jerseys
Yeah.
to bring attention to social issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for him, he was like, that's it. But, what came out of the boycott for those couple of days where they were able to effectively, increase the amount of voting stations based on, ownership of their arenas. Teams and players were registering to vote. So they were using their platform as best as they could in order to evoke change within their country and within their community. And it doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are afraid to, make mistakes when they have such, high followings or clout, because we've seen how easily people on a pedestal can fall. If
Yeah.
you look at someone like, an Ellen DeGeneres, for instance, she
Yeah.
was the queen until she wasn't anymore.
They're butchering her right now. It's rough.
I was bringing attention to an issue that came out during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say a few other things, but I just said, she was on a pedestal. She was
Yeah.
seen as America's sweetheart, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, she was untouchable.
Yeah.
She,
She was like a white Oprah.
but she made some mistakes and very quickly
Yeah.
lost all of that. It
Yeah.
knocked her down. And that's what people are afraid of. People are afraid of losing their social standing, losing their clout. Kevin Spacey, another one of them. Highly regarded actor. When all of that stuff came out, they killed him off, his show. And
That was the Netflix series, right? Where he was
yeah,
like,
House of Cards, one of the single greatest characters in any
Yeah.
show that I've ever seen. But again, it just shows you that when, you make a mistake, and obviously his mistake was really big and so was Ellen's.
Yeah.
But if something like that happens, there are people just waiting to tear you down, and that's what people are afraid of. So they don't want to put their neck out to be the face or the voice of change, or to put themselves out there, because they know the fall could be great if you step out of line even just a little bit. Unless you're Donald Trump. Donald Trump, man, the more controversy, the better his voting odds are of him becoming president one more time.
which is wild.
Yeah.
I don't even, if I was an American right now, I wouldn't even know who to like. That's what sucks. Like you only really have two options.
Yeah.
What if you don't like any of them? Because I'm not a fan of either of them, in my opinion, honestly. So
Well, vote for Kanye, right?
oh. I don't even.
That's a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, no, you bring up a great point, right? And it's unfortunate. I mean, in Canada, obviously, we have some different options. We have more options available to us, and still, even then, some people may not align with any of the views of any of them. And now either not voting or you're trying to, vote for the lesser evil in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard anytime you put the power of an entire country, especially one like the United States of America, where you have a social media famous person as the commander in chief of arguably like one of the greatest, if not the greatest, armies in the world.
In the world, yeah. That's a scary thought.
Oh yeah,
Very scary
craziness,
thought. That's
crazy.
what makes someone like Kanye feel like they can, you know what I mean, make a run for president too.
There,
Not to
there
say
may be some extenuating circumstances as to why Kanye believes that he could become president, but
yeah, yeah,
that's a politics as usual topic to tackle.
for real. It's true. It's true.
All right, last thing before I want to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit of football because I've given you a hard time about your Cincinnati Bengals, who are actually currently playing on a night that we are recording.
Yes.
But I did want to know, a lot of moving pieces. Obviously, a no preseason, which affected a lot of teams this year.
Yeah.
Currently losing 28-16 to the Cleveland Browns, which
Oh boy.
I mean says everything you need to right there.
I can't even watch the games. I really. That's why I didn't know when this first started. I didn't even know what was happening. It's hard to.
I had to bring it up. It was poetic that that they were playing on a night we were recording. Tom Brady moves to Tampa Bay. Cam Newton takes his place in New England.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of moving pieces. You got an older Drew Brees, who's probably in the final year or two of him to try to make a championship run. Aaron Rodgers has a new coach. Dallas has a new coach.
Yep.
In your mind, you're a football guy.
Yeah.
What is your prediction for Super Bowl and who wins?
That boy Patrick is playing different. It's hard to go against the champs right now. It's very hard to go against the champs. I believe Tampa Bay is the sexy pick for a lot of
Tampa Bay. Yep.
A lot of people want to go with definitely with Tom, but like, man, when he threw that pick to Janoris Jenkins in that first game and he brought that back to the house, I know that made people kind of look around like it's still early in the season. Like you said, they haven't had preseason to really like work on chemistry. And if you really know football, you know how important chemistry is. Like anybody that's played or anybody that's a huge fan, they know that the quarterback chemistry within the offense is crucial. If they're not on the same page, it doesn't work, even if you have the greatest players on paper. So for me, if we're talking Super Bowl predictions, I'm gonna say the Chiefs. I'm okay if the Chiefs don't win, and I said the Chiefs on this episode. But if I said another team and they just weren't even close, that would kill me. So I'm just gonna go with the safe pick, and I'm gonna say I think the Chiefs are gonna win.
Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP. I think he's been league MVP in his second year. $400 million contract. Just proposed to his girlfriend, all before the age of 25. Man, if you're under 25, like what have you done with your life?
For real.
Because Patrick Mahomes has taken over the world. I think he's even a minority owner for a sports team.
I think it might be is it the Dodgers, I believe? No, not the Dodgers. Sorry. Is it a Kansas City team?
I think it might be like a soccer team or something. Oh, no, it's the Royals. It's Kansas City Royals. Never mind. You're right. Yeah. Man, 25 years old. That guy could retire now and be set for life.
The moment that let me know he's a real baller is when he said proposing to my wife was more difficult than the fourth quarter in the Super Bowl. I was like, oh, he's cold. He's built differently. He's built from just a different piece of cloth than everybody else. He's the only person that I truly fear coming for the title of greatest of all time from my boy Tommy Terrific over my shoulder here. Yeah,
he's the GOAT, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared about, what Patrick Mahomes is going to look like in 3 years, let alone 10 years from now. All right, I like it. Kansas City, I can ride with that.
And dark horse pick, watch out for Seattle. Watch out for Dangerous. He's a problem. That's a little dark horse pick for you. I think he might be able to pull off something because that defense is solid, and he's like a Patrick Mahomes type player. Even though he's been in the league longer, it's almost a disrespect to say that. But they kind of have the same type of style. They can throw on the run. They can do those unorthodox throws. They can extend plays. It'll be interesting to see what happens this season.
Well, Bill Belichick, because the Patriots are playing Seattle this Sunday coming up, he has said, that he does not believe there is a better quarterback in the NFL than Russell Wilson. So
yeah, he's dangerous.
Well, I'll thank him for the lovely. Let's not give it to Marshawn Lynch and win a Super Bowl. We'll throw it and have it picked off by Malcolm Butler. I'll appreciate that. I'll take another championship ring for the Patriots.
Was that his call or was that
Pete
Carroll's call? That was Pete Carroll, right?
That's Carroll's call. I mean, there's only one place you don't throw that football if you're Russell Wilson. Unfortunately, he did throw it there.
Yeah.
I mean, like you take an incompletion at that point, stop the clock, but you don't throw a pick in the end zone like that.
That's about that is the Titans and Rams where McNair threw it. I can't remember the receiver, and he just tried to extend it and he couldn't get it. That's what
it was like a yard and a half short against the greatest show on turf, which funny enough was the year before I became a Patriots fan. Because I wasn't really following football back then. Yeah. I got into betting on like prop bets for like the Super Bowl, and that was like the first year, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." And then I just always fell in love with the underdogs. And when the Patriots played the St. Louis Rams in the Super Bowl, I was like, "All right, let's go Patriots." And then it sort of just stuck with me because you had Tom Brady coming off of taking over for Drew Bledsoe, and then Tom Brady gets injured when Drew Bledsoe comes back, and then they end up beating Torrey Holt and Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk and all of these guys, and that was it for me.
Yeah,
the New England Patriots. If you're not cheating, you ain't trying.
Jeez.
Shout out Eddie Guerrero.
I lie, I cheat, I steal.
That's it, man. Latino heat. Listen. This has been fun, man. Reno, this has been a blast. I'm glad we finally got to connect for this. Tell everybody where they could find the Politics as Usual podcast. Hit them with it.
You could find the Politics as Usual podcast on Spotify, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, Amazon Music. Pretty much any podcast platform, you can find the Politics as Usual podcast.
Shout out to Podbean, who makes that super easy to upload to all of those platforms.
They make it super sweet. And I definitely want to say thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Anytime, man.
And I definitely want you to come to our podcast so we could chop it up about the craziness that happened.
Listen. Anytime, man, you want me on, I will come and add a different take. I've already talked about, starting an after show for your podcast because I have so many thoughts and opinions on the topics that you guys talk about. It really is one of the podcasts that gets you to think and allows you to have an opinion. So I recommend anybody check it out. New episodes drop every Thursday, wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you check out the Politics as Usual podcast. I'm your host, Julian Ortiz, for my guest, Reno. Thank you for watching and listening, everybody. Have a great night.